Jeffrey, you say that belief shapes reality, but most people don't realize they've been living inside a belief. How do you begin to uncover the beliefs shaping your reality without knowing they're there?
Look, great question, Daniel. And I feel that just kicking off with that type of concept that beliefs are really the lens in which people see reality. And if the lens is smudged with self doubt or fear, no amount of external success will clear and realize true potential. So arguably getting to the root of the beliefs that it's kind of like the operating system of a computer, the beliefs that people are working with, that that really is the watershed that influences everything else that occurs in people's lives, including their happiness, including their results, including their performance.
One thing that I've been saying lately, thanks to my own curiosity and research around belief, reality, in your science, one thing I've discovered is like we don't really experience reality. We experience our brain's version of it. And I think it's just once we realize that, once we understand that, wait, that what Geoffrey sees is not the same thing I see, because your upbringing, your backgrounds, your insecurity, fear, self doubts, your stories are different than mine. And because of that, we have sort of the power to change our reality if we consciously decided to do so. How can people begin rewriting these stories that their brain
Hmm.
is telling them?
Well, I've heard a lot of people attack that issue from the point of perception, and I think psychology really would talk about how perception shapes reality. But before perception, there's how people see the world, and that really has its roots in belief. And and stated simply, belief is really about whether you see things through the lens of courage or you see things through the lens of fear, love and fear. Arguably, the two emotions that exist, and that often is the starting point that is going to influence everything that comes later, including perceptions. Because if someone is looking at, if their belief is that their dominant belief is this fear of feeling unfairly treated, you know, then everything that they do is going to go through that lens, and that is really the ladder to being a victim. And people are selling the idea of you must feel bad about that, you must feel unfairly treated. Aren't you going to stand up to that every single day? So there's this real temptation for people to go there. And there's a lot of permission in society to go there. But when you stop and think about it, that is really the choice that people have. Um, that would be different than if someone would start at the benefit of the doubt. Oh, look, that maybe that's a misunderstanding, or maybe I'm going to, think about what could be good in that particular, in that question, and that's going to lead to a different perception of what's happening, which is going to lead to a different reality. So by really winding that back and starting a lot of the deliberation of what's actually going on in our minds at the belief level, we can, um, arguably that is what moves the needle the most when it comes to everything that comes later, including performance.
Let's say that somebody's completely oblivious of what's happening in their life, that they feel just as the psychologist Carl Jung said, until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our life and we would call it fate. So it's imagine, I think arguably, I don't know, probably 80, 90, 95% of people live in the state of unconscious driven beliefs, and they feel that they are helpless, that they are just, hey, this is just my life, this is just who I am, this is just my journey, I have nothing else to do with it. What would be the first step that people can take to start, I wouldn't say waking up, but gaining that awareness that, wait a minute, I think I have some control over this. I think that the reason why I'm not happy in my relationships, I'm not happy at work, I'm not happy on a personal level, is because those stories, those beliefs that are deeply ingrained into my subconscious, and but also I have the power to rewrite them.
Hmm. Look, that's what is arguably the, part of the meaning of life, where we all start raw, in a blank canvas. We're influenced from, babies and children, by our parents and the people around us and our teachers. And we come through that whole journey of growing up with, a set of beliefs that are either deeply embedded and ones that are almost booby trapped because someone has said, till the day I die, you remember, till the day you die, you remember this. And, a 5-year-old hears this from a grandfather. And then all of a sudden, that's a very deep, difficult uh, set of belief system to let go of. But that's where people through conversations, through education, through mentors, through listening, through reading, they are able to find things that challenge their beliefs and challenge their perspectives over time. And I think eventually there's an opportunity for people to reach a watershed moment, which I sometimes describe as really either luck and hardship are bestowed randomly, or there's a relationship between where we are, where we want to be, and it's what occupies our minds, our thoughts and our emotions, charged positively or negatively, that are either going to bridge that gap and allow us to walk into that future reality that we envision, or we have no control over that. And both can't be true. And that is really the watershed moment that I think people often have an opportunity to learn through sports when they have a goal of winning. And team sports often create that type of momentum where the structures that that people or athletes that participate in those team sports are left with is this sense of control over their future reality. Or that can sometimes happen in professional environments. It's very much you know you know is a part of how people teach sales when they set goals and have targets. They're asked, how much revenue are you going to generate this month, and what is your worst case, what is your last case. There are a lot of very institutional and business structures that lend themselves to that, and that's the opportunity that people, I think, have to get out, and then once they get a taste of that, um, it creates a self-fulfilling loop where belief fuels performance. And once you get better performance through your belief, that deepens your belief in this whole system working. And it really is a lifelong journey. And some people figure it out earlier to their advantage, and some people figure out later, and some people don't.
I like the example that you gave about team sports because even though somebody that I didn't really do team sports growing up, I just played soccer or basketball, but it wasn't on a team like practicing 2, 3, 4 times a week. One thing that teaches athletes, because I've talked to quite a few of them, is the understanding that I can close the gap between where I am and where I want to be by practicing, by putting the work. And every quote unquote failure that we have is just a step closer to getting to that level that we can perform in order to win, in order to succeed. But those who don't have experienced that, they feel that anytime that they try something new and they fail, they try something new and it doesn't go well and it doesn't stick, and you can try for a week, maybe a month, and nothing happens, then it's so easy to just give up. And this work, the one that you were talking about in your TEDx talk, and the kind of work I've been trying to do a lot in my life, it requires patience. It requires understanding ourselves at a deeper level. And I feel that sure, those with awareness, those who are highly curious, are able to reach further in life because they can apply those things. But I like, once again, I like the use the sports analogy because it teaches your mind to train a certain way, to show up in life in a certain way. And when it comes to sales, one phrase that really impacted me on your TEDx talk was that you said that the first and most important sale happens in the mind. if we cannot sell to ourselves that we are enough, that we're capable, that we can get into the relationship, that we can get the job, that we can launch the business, that we can have the money or buy the house or the car, it's so hard to actually accomplish those goals. What do you think gets in the way of people buying into themselves?
Hmm. Well, look, I think it really has to do with people's starting points and people how deeply ingrained the beliefs that they learn from the people that are around them when they're young and influence them are ingrained in a way that can be um, uncovered later and deprogrammed and rewired. And a lot of the processes that I am a proponent of professionally through the work that I do is all about understanding those beliefs, not from a therapy or a psych or a counseling perspective, but really understanding how people's minds work, which I've done for many years as a global CEO. Been able to sit down with people and really understand what they're thinking when they're going about the job, and spending time with them to create that transformative experience where later on they're choosing to have different things occupy their minds when they're embarking upon these behaviors than not. So I think everyone, it's all about lifelong learning. We all start uh, really knowing nothing, and we're shaped, and then it's about unlearning some of those things and replacing them by structured processes that are later going to be taught through sports. Sports allows people to forgive themselves for failure. In a way. Um, Sales is a game of failures. Baseball is a game of failures. If you're batting 300, you're doing pretty well. So it's ingrained into the culture, and by people allowing themselves to fail, that's a big part of it, because if people aren't able to fail in practice, they're not going to improve, and that's a big part of it. So look, I think that life gives us the opportunity through the experiences that we have to everyone is met with a certain level of embedded beliefs that are wrong, and but it's all about seizing the opportunity to through the life that we live, through whatever activities inspire us, to use that to reshape, to create an opportunity to create beliefs that are conducive um, to behavior that is conducive to better performance in life, success, not just success in professionally, but success in life.
Yeah, I think that is we see, how can I phrase this? Our minds are on blockers to some extent, because if we can think about anything, we can imagine any scenario in our life. We can imagine how aliens will look like. We can picture in our imagination runs wild, and yet many times it is hard to imagine ourselves being successful in a way that we can sell ourselves that belief, to a point that here's where I want to understand more, or even how to describe to people what the difference between one and the other one is, because I feel that there's a difference between belief and wishful thinking, right? I can imagine myself having the mansion or the cars or the girls or the boat or this or that or whatever, and yet that is more wishful thinking. What would be the difference between, once again, a belief, a true belief, and a wishful thinking, and where does the belief come from?
Hmm. Well, look, this is something that I outline practically in the TED Talk, you may recall, where I give 3 fundamental steps for incorporating the quantum power of belief into people's everyday lives. And the first one is a principle of um, um, rather than seeing obstacles, seeing possibilities, imagining the best possible outcome in any situation, and just being aware of what would be that utopian outcome that one wants to be, and have that occupy your mind rather than what could go wrong. I flippantly use or I refer to Murphy's Law at one point because it makes me laugh as a concept, because it really is a true principle. Whatever could go wrong will go wrong, but it only happens that way because that's what's occupying your mind. If you're thinking about what can go right, that's what's going to happen. It really is about attraction, not about anything that's pessimistic. So, the three fundamental principles are: imagine the best possible outcome in every situation. The second is to be fully present, and to really um, embrace the power that exists when you look at these concepts through quantum physics or neuropsychology or advanced psychology. Um, be fully present, because that's what gives you the power. And then the third part, which you referred to, is making sure that it's just not belief without action, because I do call that wishful thinking. So what turns the belief into tangible results through that process, would be um, you know preparation, uh, practice, and self-reflection, but and lifelong learning. When you're taking action through this lens of what occupies your mind as to what can go right as opposed to what can go wrong, and you take action on that in a fully present way, it is a powerful formula. And if people can keep track of those variables, and as the day unfolds moment by moment, use that as the reminder, or what really the focal point of how they attack every situation that occurs. um, there's a lot of power in that. So I can get into sort of the mechanics of it if need be, but that is the framework that I believe answers your question and makes sure that people aren't just sitting under a tree, waiting for things to happen. Taking inspired action is a big part of the formula.
All right. So the first one is imagine a world of possibilities. For people in the audience, they might think, well, but it's hard every time my brain pictures worst case scenario. That is part of our negativity bias. One thing that I like to tell people is you might be the thinker of your thoughts, but not the thoughts themselves. And thoughts, if you can imagine worst case scenario before it happens, right? That means that it's not. I mean, do you know 100%? Are you 100% certain that it's going to happen? The worst case scenario? No, you cannot. You cannot predict the future. Therefore, you can also add a world of possibility. Yes, that requires some time and effort, and consciously becoming aware that, hey, I see how my brain is running a predictive coding, is is forecasting the future based on my past experiences, based on my past failures, based on my past pains, and is trying to warn me of what's going to happen, but it's only trying to predict based on what is familiar to it. So I would, for people in case that they feel a pushback from their nervous system, say, well, that's not possible, I always imagine worst case scenario. You can control that by practicing. Now, step 3, action, which is also, I think that many people who even want to manifest, or what they call manifest, like, well, if I see it and I visualize, things are going to come my way. No, I mean, you have to take those steps. The way that I like to tell people to do, at least that have worked for me to some extent, is like, okay, what's my ultimate goal? Let me try to then from there reverse engineer and see what would be my next step today, because many times I don't have all the 5, 10, 15, 100 steps. I mean, I don't know all the steps, but I can sort of maybe see the first one or two in front of me. Now that I address point 1 and point 3, how do this is the tricky one. How do we are in the present moment? The number 2 is like being present is one of the hardest things even for the mind, because our minds are going to be between the past and the future. And when we're between those two, it's so hard to be grounded and feel sort of at peace. Like, hey, I'm today here. The past doesn't exist anymore, and the future is an illusion, because we're never going to be living in the future. Even 2 minutes from now, it's going to be the present again. So how can people what can people do to just be more in the present moment, now that we have addressed how to do better for point 1 and point 3?
Yeah, look, it is something that people have to commit to, and that's something that people have to practice and justify, because because there are people around them, or books or philosophies or guidance that would suggest that that is a better place for creating a better life, and better a better mindset that's conducive to creating beautiful things. In the TED talk, I describe how a beautiful novelist can describe a landscape at a level of detail that can captivate you, because you can smell the flowers, and you can see the colors, and you can admire the beauty, and be appreciative and in gratitude, and just naturally speaking, that type of observation is putting us in a fertile place for creating good things, and manifesting. But um, you know I could do the same thing by just resisting the temptation um, to grieve my past. If I'm appreciative, if I'm appreciative of where I am now in this moment, I can also be appreciative for every experience, good or bad, that has brought me to this moment. And if I can think about my past that way, I can neutralize the power of it um, to control me, or to cause me to focus or grieve things or relive things that are not productive. And when it comes to um, staying present, by knowing that by staying present, that I am having a influence on my future in a positive way, because I am liberating myself from the things that have that have held me back in the past, and instead supercharging the highest possibility for the future. Then the present is a wonderful place to be, and to create beautiful future outcomes. And again, the nice thing is this can all be grounded in quantum physics, because quantum physics is a modern physics. It's very different than a Newtonian physics that we might learn in high school, and that a lot of our structures are built on. But quantum physics would reinforce these principles, and I may let you get into that through your questioning otherwise, but but being aware of the mechanics of that can allow us permission and motivate us to really be attentive, to pay attention to things in the present, um, and try to control, make the best experience of that, as opposed to um, controlling the future or controlling the past.
Let's dive a little bit more into that for those who might not understand what quantum physics are, or how does it work, or the concept around it, and how they can use that for their own benefit.
Hmm. Yeah. So look, I've learned this over a couple decades, and it's a more of a hobby to me than something that I was studying at first. But what I've learned through a lot of reading and principle is that quantum physics is a modern physics, kind of a funky physics that has emerged through the study of particles, and how they behave under different conditions. And in many ways, in theoretical physics, there's been a lot of confusion, because the Newtonian physics, that has driven a lot of our structures previously, were unexplained, or did not explain the behavior of a lot of particles. But the key principles that relate to this conversation, Daniel, would be that particles behave differently under observation. So when there's a famous experiment called the double slit experiment, where they're shooting particles through these slits, and if they act as waves if you're not observing, but as soon as you observe, they collapse into a different form, a concrete state. And that was unexplained, and they would use cameras to do all these experiments, and it was quite amazing. And so what was really discovered through all of this is that quantum physics is the science of possibilities, and that in every moment there are unlimited possibilities, and the observer dictates the outcome. Now, that's all very well established from a scientific perspective. There have been those theoretical physicists, not all of them, who have said, hey, if that's how particles behave in a lab, our bodies are physically made up of particles. How does that relate to human consciousness? And when you bridge that gap of applying those same scientific principles to human consciousness, you realize that in any given moment, our mind holds many possibilities, meaning the very best outcome in any given situation or the very worst outcome. And it's our thoughts and our minds that are act as the observer effect that will dictate whether we create moment by moment, we manifest the good outcome because that's what we're focusing on, or the bad outcome, or something in between.
That is fascinating because the idea behind manifestation that I had, because I would ask people for years because I did not understand what was between daydreaming and manifesting. And they basically, I finally, after reading and researching and just trying to understand at a deeper level, I realized that once your nervous system, your brain truly believes that that is a possibility, that that is real, then based through neuroscience, through either the the reticular activating system, which is what filters out anything that goes against our beliefs and our thoughts, it will start working hard to find the way to make it real because inner brain is already real. But now adding another layer of, well, we can, besides our brains trying to find the possibility or trying to find the reality that sort of shapes what we're looking for, and this is something that I've shared with some people outside the podcast, is in neuroscience, and you probably know this, but for those members of the audience that don't know, our senses can gather around 11 millions of bits of information per second, where a prefrontal cortex can only process between 30 and 50 at most. So our brains literally filter out 99.9% of what we're exposed to. So as you said, if we only focus on the negative or the worst case scenario, that's where our brains say, okay, that's your thought. That's where we're going to, because I think our brain's job is to make our thoughts real. And if we truly change our belief, and if I believe, hey, I'm going to be a successful podcaster, or I'm going to be a successful dad, or a successful boyfriend, or a successful entrepreneur, whatever the case may be, and I truly believe it, my brain's going to find a way to make it true. But now, introducing the quantum physics, things that even we can shape the particles that are outside of us by just having the right observation, seems like, which is even more fascinating. And I think it's hard to wrap my head around it because imagine you're made of particles and energy, I'm made of particles and energy. I wonder how my perception of you might change if I think differently about who Geoffrey is. Just like just a fascinating topic. I don't know.
Well, look, that's what dictates energy in the room. That's what creates tension and stress. There's a lot of things that are shaped between in communication based on what I'm thinking and what you're thinking, and that's why some people who are looking to shape their lives are very selective about the types of people that they want to be around, because it's not hard to find a problem with something, if you look hard enough. And they're all, and if there are people that are going to be dragging people who are trying to take a proactive approach, are going to be dragging them back into nonsense that they've already conquered through their life's journey and all their learning, and they're trying to avoid to create better outcomes in their lives. Yeah, these are real situations. So, like, ultimately, I like what you say about the manifesting in the subconscious, because arguably, what we're living is the conscious. And there are a lot of people out there visualizing and imagining things. Um, you know, and the subconscious is really the operating system of what manifests. There's a superconscious, which is our relationship with collective energy. And but I think a lot of people may not succeed in their manifestation because they're, on the conscious level, they're trying to force themselves into believe something, but because they haven't really conquered that belief, they're not fooling their subconscious, and the subconscious is not giving them the future results that they might hope for, when they try to engineer that consciously. So belief is really the linchpin that is needed to um, to drive that change. And I remember just a very simple quote in Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, which was a book I read many years ago. But it was the quote was the best thing you could do to influence your future outcomes is trick your brain into believing that it's already happened. And that's kind of the little lie that we have to tell in our belief that almost gets our subconscious on side, that allows the things that we desire to occur and to manifest.
Yes, and it took me a while to understand that, as I mentioned earlier, because to me it's like, okay, what is exactly meaning believe, or believing in the world of possibilities, or believing that the outcome I want is already here. How am I going to believe that I have a ton of money, or I have the partner I want, or I have the job, or I have the success when it's not here? And after doing a lot of research, I realized that you have to feel it. It's almost like feeling, for instance, if you want to have a ton of money, like many people want that, what is money going to give you? Peace? Okay, then try to find some other thing that gives you peace, and trying to attach the belief or the thought of you having a lot of money, and then you're already embodying what you might feel like if you have that. Or if you want to find your partner and then you want to feel loved, well, find other scenarios in your life where you felt love, and trying to implement the new thought and new belief, so your nervous system attaches those two, or just connects, oh, we are feeling love and we are imagining this whatever person we are with, and we match that, and we're starting to sort of believe in more. It's all about not being in our head, but mostly in our body. And that's why, to me, when you say what you said, is okay, what a lot of people suffer from, and I did it for a while, was the dissonance between this is what I want, but this is how I feel. And of course, it's not going, if they're not in sync, nothing is going to happen. And I think it's just how we can collapse timelines as well. That if we, the way that we tend to do things as the Newtonian laws, like action leads a reaction. Okay, I think about something, I start doing the action, and then I feel it. But what if I feel it first? Then the outcome comes faster, because the brain already feels like, okay, if it's already here, and the brain doesn't can't tell between what's real and what's thought created, therefore it will find ways to make it true. But when you talk about collapsing infinite possibilities into reality through focus, through the quantum physics that we were just talking about, how do we make sure that we're not unconsciously collapsing ourselves into smallness or limitation without realizing? Because I think that if we think, okay, I think I'm focusing, but as we just talked about, how about the subconscious self, and then I'm limiting myself without even realizing?
Hmm. Look, this is something that I attacked in my recent book, The Revenue Catalyst, which I guess the TED talk that I did recently was an excerpt from chapter 10 from my book, The Revenue Catalyst: Mastering the Art of Sales, because I wrote it as if I was perturbed as to why business schools don't teach sales, where most CEOs are responsible for revenue. They teach finance, accounting, marketing, and human resources. And I've done a lot of goal, and in that book, I told a lot of stories about how I've done goal setting with people in sales organizations over the years. And and this is a very common practice in that type of business, and everyone is writing down their goals. But the problem is, unless you understand that trapping that you just described, it's a very dangerous activity. Because if you ask someone, what is your goal? And I want to create this much revenue, or I want to make this much money, um, people are going to look at it from one of two lenses. And this comes back to the quantum physics. They're going to be, they're either going to be saying anything is possible, and I'm going to walk through space and time till I achieve those results, and I believe in it, or they're going to be noticing the absence of it. And if you're saying, why isn't that money here and I don't have it here? That's my goal, but right now I don't have it. And if that's where someone's focus is, all they're going to be doing is staying in the same place and not advancing towards the creation of the money, because they're harboring a negative thought, which is the absence of it, as opposed to the possibility of creating it naturally. So there are a lot of trappings in these things, and so I think there's some fundamental starting points that need to exist, such as, I do believe that anything is possible, and if I can be happy now in the future, I can be happy now, and really trying to um, you know, unwire the trappings that exist in all these methodologies, and understand when they're working towards you and when they're not. Because so many people try to make them work, but don't succeed because there are elements of negativity embedded that don't allow the whole functioning of the process to occur as one would want.
Hmm. Hey, one thing that I've been working a lot, or doing a lot of research and applying it into my work, is when it comes to identities, because I feel that the way that we operate, we have the stories we have been telling ourselves, or stories our brains are telling us. Then we have our limiting beliefs, and even deeper is the identities we have, the the the, the person we are for ourselves. If each example, have if I'm somebody with anger management issues, then I'm always going to be angry because I believe that that's who I am unconsciously. And whenever I try something else, it will go against my identity. My nervous system is going to say, hold on, that's not who we are. Let's stay here. So what I've helped a few friends of mine, I've helped myself as well, is sort of break free from those identity loops. Is, well, maybe if I'm a salesperson, my my goal would be to sell this year 5 million. But can I really do it? That doesn't happen to somebody like me, who's more shy, who's more introverted, who doesn't have a big personality, and right away I'm already behaving and acting according to my subconscious identity. And I think that's what people stay small. And it's not about that they don't aim high, it's they don't believe that they cannot achieve it based on those subconscious beliefs. Based on that, um, in your experience, whether for yourself or people you have coached, people that you have helped, what are some of the most powerful beliefs interrupters or tools you use to help someone challenge a subconscious identity loop?
Hmm. Well, look, whether you believe you can be, do, or have anything you want or you don't is an interesting question at a starting point, because that really flushes out whether someone has deep embedded limitations that are dominating them in any given moment. And so understanding people's mindset at that level, and understanding people's propensity um, you know to see things out of fear versus see things out of courage or love and be brave about things is another. And these are just some of the fundamental things that need to be understood and figured out at the decode stage of some of the work I do in this in belief engineering, which is the this concept that I've created, that led to the TED Talk. Decoding and really understanding those hidden beliefs and where people are, and spending time with people to understand why they think that way, and maybe challenging them to understand if someone thinks this is just how I am, and I can't do anything about it. One could get into neuroplasticity, and how neuroplasticity is a discovery that really shows that we can rewire our brains by practicing different thought patterns for as little as 20, 30 days. And the result of that is that different chemicals are going to be firing in the brain, and brain alignments are going to rewire themselves in a way that's conducive to what you practice. And our brains do respond this way. So, if someone it's having the capacity to be able to understand these things, but a logical person is going to perhaps see things and do things differently as a result of knowing that, I believe that I was told that if I thought that I could do big things, that I those were illusions of grandeur, which was a stigma that used to happen, in centuries before, to keep people mediocre and keep the ruling class in power. These are just fabricated barriers, or a caste system that tell someone that they're they're from the poor caste, they can't act like a rich person. These are all structures that sometimes need to be conquered in order to just decode people's beliefs. And you might want to spend time looking at that before you rewire and really give people the tools, whether that's quantum physics or 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 neuroscience or different explanations for really how they can optimize their brain for high performance, and then practice it, embed it into what it is that they do on a frequent basis. And if you're doing this within a sales organization and you're working with a group of people, you scale. You make sure, and then it becomes culture. So these are all steps that that can be taken and are valuable and important. And when you look at how, for example, many organizations would try to attack that problem. They're going to bring in a trainer, they're going to coach, they're going to do KPIs, they're going to do reviews. That barely moves the needle. If you really want to shape performance at a professional level, getting into belief is really fixing the operating system that's going to allow everything else to function better. And that applies, like I said, professionally to those types of organizations, Daniel, or personally if someone is trying to just make it work for themselves.
I agree a lot with what you said, especially the fact that there is a lot of lack of knowledge nowadays on in these topics in particular. We see a lot of corporations, a lot of leaders, CEOs that, well, just give us a training so we can sell better, we can train our people better, so we are either employees or sales rep perform better. But one thing that I've realized even for myself is that no matter how much you try, if the action you're taking goes against what your nervous system finds safety from, you're going to lose that battle 10 times out of 10 times. It's going to be through procrastination, through avoidance, through whatever other methods that your body is going to find to stop you from taking that step. Because for your body, what feels familiar is what keeps you safe, and that's their job, is to keep you safe. And even if the possibility, even if what you're trying to accomplish is better for you, the body doesn't know that, so it feels unsafe. And the way that the nervous system can be at peace and create that is just by creating a safe foundation through belief, through identity, and say, okay, now we can step into that without so much pushback. We don't have to white knuckle our way through it because it's not going to work. And I feel that, yes, that what have helped me a lot is, once again, knowing more about these topics. The more people I interview about different topics, the more knowledge I get, the more I understand, okay, now that I have the body of work when it comes to understanding at a deeper level, now I can take more agency of my life. I can do things in a different way. And even what you mentioned about neuroscience, about creating new neural pathways that can take, I don't know, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever the case may be, it depending on how much you practice becoming aware and implementing a thought. Another thing that can work for people to understand is those thoughts that you stop having or you stop, they eventually dissipate or dissolve because our brain is very efficient. Our brain is trying to keep those shortcuts as small as possible based on our own beliefs. But I guess, to me, I just want to see if you can give to people a little bit of rundown or explanation what to expect when they go through this process, because I know that this process can be painful because of my own experience. I know that this process can create a lot of self-doubt, like, well, I don't know if I'm doing it right because I don't see any results, I don't see anything different. And then there's one part that almost nobody has talked about, and I would have never known until I experienced myself, is if you go beyond the belief, going with the identities, as we talk, who we are for ourselves. And I'm somebody who's been very shy, who's been introverted, who is has always been invisible, and now I'm stepping into a platform that I need to be seen more because I want to be more successful. That leaving that old identity behind creates a lot of grief within the nervous system, which might make us feel confused. It's like, well, why do I feel this way? Why do I feel sadness, or why do I feel overwhelmed? Because I'm leaving that part of me. So what can, in your own experience, or even the people that you have helped, what have you seen? What can people expect if they decided today to start this journey, and in terms of the self transformation, changing their belief and improving their lives?
Yeah, look, it's actually a great point, and maybe I can suggest a different starting point, notwithstanding what I said before, because um, some of these things, words that I've thrown around, we could be, do, or have anything that we want. These are, we have to get to a certain point, and not everyone is at that point, because we're our egos don't want us to admit that um, that we've you know haven't taken the right path, and so sometimes there needs to be a shift into humility. That is the only way we can actually accept the fact that there were things that have happened in my life that I didn't like, and in the past I blamed people for it and I was a victim. But instead, if I'm going to take this step that we're talking about, I need to take responsibility for the good things and the bad things that have already occurred in my life, because I'm created them by walking through time and space, into moments that I've created with a time space delay, um, in the manifestation. And if people are not going through that process and accepting that responsibility for the good and the bad that has occurred in their lives to a point, at least as a starting point, um, it's difficult to introduce anything else. Once they do that, then it's empowering, because now all of a sudden people say, "Well, hey, if I had, if I have that level of control over my life in the past that I didn't have the information to make work to my advantage, and I've learned certain principles through this decoding and this rewiring process, now all of a sudden I can create predictable outcomes in my future. And how beautiful is that?" So it's a bitter pill to swallow that the stuff that we didn't like was our fault, but it is the most beautiful thing in the world if you accept it as being freedom when it comes to having way more control over our futures.
I think it might be one of the most painful red pills that somebody can take, because for two reasons, I think, and I think that's why many people don't. Because number one, as you said, well, does that mean that everything that has happened in my past is, sort of technically speaking, my fault because I unconsciously manifested it? Which is almost, if you were miserable, that can be very, very painful, because now if you don't have self-compassion and you have a lot of judgment, that can just be even harder on yourself. And the second reason why I think is one of the most painful red pills that somebody can take is because, oh, once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Once I know that this is true, anything that happens from this moment on is all on me. If I don't have the life I want, it's because of me. I cannot blame the government. I cannot blame the economy. I cannot blame my parents. I cannot blame my partner. I cannot blame anybody but me. And I think that probably, perhaps, that's why a lot of people have that kind of pushback, because opening your eyes and realizing that it's always been on you. You are the creator, right? You don't need to be in survival mode all the time. Is, as you said, empowering, gives you a lot of agency, but at this and a lot of control over your reality and your future. But also, it comes with a lot of pressure, which it would lead me to a point, is that how do, let's say, someone who has been living in survival mode most of their life, like, that it wasn't never their fault, it's just how the environment they grew up on that created a set of beliefs. It was whether in a toxic environment or in an environment with a lot of abandonment or unsafety, and now their brain is being wired to just live and repeat those loops over and over and over. And stepping out of it is probably one of the hardest things from a belief standpoint, because I didn't know anything else. How can somebody slowly or fast, I mean, it doesn't matter to me, but I guess which would be the more efficient way to just stepping out of that and leave that survival mode behind, that could be very addictive because it feels like home.
Mm. Yeah, look, I remember being asked the question that I've pondered ever since, many years ago. Would I rather be right or happy? And when you think about it, it is hard to be. If someone is unwilling not to be right about the bad stuff that's occurred as they've been learning, um, you're not going to cross that chasm. And that's where humility comes in, being able to take responsibility, to be able to, you know, you know, not, buy into the narcissism that society sometimes would give us permission to do, which really protects us and makes us very far away from taking any responsibility for the past, but also very far away from the ability to control our futures. So I think that in many ways it comes down to what people want. And this is not something that you can proselytize. It's not something that like I said before, it's either going to happen early in someone's life, later in someone's life, or never. But you can't force it. And often it's an epiphany that occurs because sometimes people hit rock bottom, and it's the only way that they can actually deal with life is to let go of that control. And that's often what springboards people into and makes them malleable to be decoded and rewired. Um, but there are some people that will take that forever and they'll embed it deeply into their children and grandchildren and say, our family were just stubborn and we never forget and we never forgive. And you tell a 5-year-old that, some people take that to their grave because it's a tough thing to give up throughout your life, notwithstanding all the opportunities and all the information there is everywhere for people to think and do things differently.
I like that question a lot. Do I want to be right or do I want to be happy? Because it should be easy, straightforward. Oh, I just want to be happy. But saying that I don't want to be right, which means that I'm okay to be with being wrong, goes against the ego, and we will have that pushback. Say, hey, no, 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 we don't want to be wrong. We would rather be right than be happy. But I guess we can just start thinking about it. Hey, what's important here is me being right one time, or being happy, being at peace. Which I guess it would be a question that I have for those who decide, hey, I want to be happy. I I don't mind if I'm not right, because at the end I've been suffering a lot, been through a lot of pain, and clearly what I've been doing or what I've been believing hasn't been helpful or hasn't served me at all. But how do you coach someone who's intellectually bought into this new identity, this new persona that they can be or they can become, but emotionally and somatically still feel like their old self?
Look, I think these things can sometimes happen overnight through an epiphany, or it's a process, and when people slip back into old behaviors that aren't serving them that well periodically and get stung again, and then they're motivated to then embark upon these things again. It can sometimes take time, and it can take a few failures and a few tries. But um, you know, going back to that point that once someone sees this working for them and to their advantage, the pragmatists in us get hooked on it, and we want more of it. So it's finding that traction where the rubber hits the road, uh, a little bit of proof that wow, this is serendipitous, and this is exactly what I needed, and it's almost like the universe gave me what I was asking for. Those moments can be very, very powerful in causing people to uh, make different behaviors in the future, and often people will get to the point where they will make that work for them for a period of time, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, just really good, and they start relying on their ego and their self to justify things, and they lose the power that they've gained through that manifestation experience. So often people will go back and forth in that process for periods of time until hopefully eventually they will get it and it will be embedded into their daily behaviors. And every moment as it unfolds, life is a matter of moments and decisions. And if we are um, charged with the right mental energy, positively in the moment, with the right things occupying our minds, and moment by moment we are making sensible decisions to bridge the gap between where we are and where we want to go, we can engineer these things. And sometimes we'll go off into the woods or into the ditch for a little bit, but there's always that journey back. And I think, it's like, what is the meaning of life? Is it, part of it might be to figure out how we can become the best versions of ourselves by using the powers and the laws that exist out there to our advantage to create the best possible life that we can for as early in our lives as we can by embedding it and making it happen.
Hmm. Sounds like that one, we need to have the courage, and the courage is not the absence of fear, but the taking action despite of the fear. And the second thing I sort of took from your answer is almost, if we were going to put it as an image, that I can see my future self and I'm about to take an action here. What would my future self do at this particular moment? If for instance I want to get a job in sales, or I want to apply to be a manager, and I feel that I might not have the qualifications, my current self wouldn't apply, but my future self would take the leap and apply. Kind of like a very simple example. Or if I'm approaching, for instance, for me, an example for me would be having a top, A-lister podcast guest, like, Joe Dispenza or something like that, right? To me would be, oh, my current self probably wouldn't even email him because he's gonna say no because he doesn't have time for somebody like me. But my future self will probably take the leap. It's like, you know what? Why not? And I guess those small actions, that some of them, as you said, are probably, if I email Joe Dispenza tomorrow, I will fail. I wouldn't get any response. But taking more and more of those aligned actions with the person I want to become eventually will rewire my brain. I will tell my nervous system, hey, this is who we are. This is not, there's no other ways, which is, I find it fascinating and very, it is, I can find it is easy to do. I wouldn't say easy, but it's very, with that behavior, we can make the process easier, I guess. Geoffrey, I would love to have more conversation with you because as I told you before we start recording, I have a ton of questions, but we're running out of time. But as a closing question, if somebody feels lost, if somebody feels like, hey, this is not the life I want, something needs to change, and I feel that I can do better. I feel that I can achieve great things. I feel I can be happy, be successful. What would be the very first step that person can take in order to start changing their life?
Like, look, for me, it's all about having the right information to make the right decisions. And just speaking, personally, I recall a moment where I really wanted to take certain steps to rewire my thinking at a certain point where I knew that there was an opportunity to do so because I had been tantalized by the possibility that, wow, maybe I do have a certain more control over my future life than I thought before. you know, Going out and getting the information and using that information to be able to then understand it through a thought process. There's no shortage of information. We walk past it every day. It's there. There are people around us that have the information that we need to take that first step. So, a big part of it is just really having the openness, treat information non-judgmentally, take it as being, maybe I don't know everything, with humility, as said several times during this interview, and having an openness to seeing how, what that means, and just spending time with that information. I remember going through that process. It didn't take me more than a week of reading, or 10 days of really getting into things, that I was actually doing things differently, and taking small steps towards it and changing my behavior, and changing, you know, the, the people I wanted to be around. Like it all kind of spirals in a good way once you take that first step. So the opportunity is there, the information is there, the people are there. It really just comes down to whether you um, want it and believe in it or not.
Love that. Love that. In fact, I feel energized even though it's Friday afternoon, because I feel that there's once you truly understand, once you truly see that you can achieve or create whatever anything you want, it is very you start feeling a lot of energy and a lot of like, hey, we can do this. So I love this, and I love this conversation with you. Once again, as I told you, I have to bring you back because I feel that we only scratch the surface of everything that we can accomplish if we understand this at a deeper level. But yeah, Geoffrey, where can people find you, either work with you, buy your book, follow your work, anything?
Yeah, well, look, most of what we've talked about, I've tried to put online at my website, which is geoffreymreid.com. So the way my name is spelled on the screen, without the dots, geoffreymreid.com. I talk about, it was originally just a book site. My book came out, The Revenue Catalyst, Mastering the Art of Sales, came out last September. It became a bestseller within 6 months. And really, I wrote that as as if I were teaching the curriculum at University of a business school. But because I've worked at coaching sales teams, and the supercharge of what it is really what we talked about today, that drives performance. That's created this whole element of the belief engineering that we've talked about. To order the book, they can find it on Amazon, every country. So just under the Revenue Catalyst or my name, it pops up straight away. And on the website, anyone who has any questions or inquiries can just type in the short form, and I read those myself, and I get back to people personally when they do. So pretty easy to engage with me through that process.
Awesome. Yes, I'll add all those links to the show notes and YouTube description. And once again, Geoffrey, thank you so much for your time. And
And the TED Talk obviously is under the TED Talk is under my name as well, just under the quantum power of belief. Um, uh, your mindset shapes your
yeah,
success. So that's there as well.
great title, by the way. Great title to for a TEDx talk. Great title. So, yes, once again, Geoffrey, thank you so
Thank you.
much, and I'm looking forward to talk to you again in the future.
I look forward to it as well. The time just flew. So really enjoyed talking to you, Daniel.